So Dan and Olivia came back, and then they actually decided to start their own vineyard, which is pretty cool. So Scout Vineyard was born, and they have 16 acres of vines where they now are growing their own grapes. And they have since, and when did you open, Dan? That was,
We opened our doors in the time of August of 2020.
so, right?
Great time to open a business, right?
Yes, yes. Actually, in retrospect, it is. I opened most of my businesses during COVID.
I
So,
totally agree.
hey, good time as any, right? But what they've got with their 16 acres, and they grow a lot of Chardonnay, amongst other things, but their focus, and we're gonna be enjoying the Chardonnay tonight, and their Petite Syrah are known as Derif. At least, but they also have a rosé, Marquette Nouveau, and more. So please check out their website, check out their cool wine club, definitely visit them and support them as well. So I'm pleased to introduce Dan, who's going to take us through the evening. But I'm going to tee up with a question, Dan, because you named the place Scout. Why Scout?
So it's probably the most common first question we get for folks at the winery. And the truth is, when we were going through the process of starting the winery, we called ourselves Budmen Todd Vineyards because my last name's Budmen. My wife's maiden name is Todd. And after writing that, I don't know, 300 times for the state government, 500 times for the federal government, it started to sound more like a law firm than a winery. And we said, that's not going to work. So we went back to the drawing board. 100 names later on a whiteboard, and Scout was the one that stuck out because our first jobs in the Napa Valley in the wine industry were as vineyard scouts. And those are the people who are responsible for going out the vineyard, monitoring for pests, disease, ripening. And we like that the industry took us from California to New Zealand back to where our roots we set during our time at the colleges. So we call ourselves Scout. It's a lot easier to remember than Budmen Todd Vineyards, and it doesn't sound like a law firm.
That's awesome. I thought it might have been your dog or you were a Boy Scout or something like that.
It is
That's a better story.
It is remarkable how many people pull up the driveway because their dog's name is Scout, and it's a great entry. So hey, we are dog friendly if you have a dog.
So Dan, tell us then, why don't you start just talking a little bit about the Finger Lakes wine region?
Yeah, so Jim, I think part of what I want to highlight is our time at the colleges was amazing. People embraced with open arms. People embraced our ideas with open arms. But I think that what I want to highlight tonight is that the Finger Lakes community has done the same thing. And this very event is a testament to that, because I got to give a shout out to two people who are not associated with the colleges at all, but are on tonight's webcast. And that's because they're part of the Finger Lakes wine community. And that is Lindsay and Dave, and also Tim, Lori, Randy, and I'm sorry, Tim, Lori, Randy, and Jackie. They all have embraced us and helped our business grow. And that is a true testament to why we came back. But the Finger Lakes has really grown. If you look at what the federal government classifies as wine that can be produced in the Finger Lakes, it's basically due east of Syracuse to due west of Rochester. Or sorry, due east of Rochester, due west of Syracuse. That's a massive area. If you look at the Napa Valley, you could fit all of Seneca Lake in the Napa Valley. So it's a massive area, but also a diversity of agriculture across that area. I mean, we have apples, we have tons of corn, wheat, soybeans grown, we have tons of vegetables grown. And all of that creates this really unique opportunity to draw tourists to this region and share with them what makes this region special. Great food with restaurants using local ingredients. Great wine, as you agree, I agree. And all of that synthesizes itself into a memorable experience for tourists. If there's anything that COVID has shown us, is that during the COVID era, we had to kind of adapt. We had to change our businesses. For those of you who have visited the Finger Lakes in the past, it was kind of always this model at wineries and breweries that it's kind of a turn and churn model. Get in, taste a few wines, and move on to the next. If anything, COVID made us change that to be a little bit more hospitality based. Give customers an educational experience about what makes a glass of Finger Lakes Chardonnay different from a glass of California Chardonnay. which I guess I'll talk about a Chardonnay.
Which you will. Now, one of the things, and Dan, and this is always remarkable to me, and you referenced the size of the Finger Lakes wine region and the series of microclimates here and why wine actually is favorable. We're in what's called a cold climate versus a warm. I know you're going to talk about Chardonnay here versus California and what those differences are, but what strikes me here, and last week, we had a 70-degree day last week, right? Which in February in Geneva, and all of you know who've been here and who've gone to school here what a February is like. It's miserable. It's gray, it's snowy, it's awful. It literally is snowed. I think today is the first day it's really snowed in months. And last week we had a 70-degree day. Talk a little bit about the climate here. Talk about the lakes and what they do, how the grapes are situated here, what a cold climate means for grape growing.
It means a lot of challenges, but in good challenges, there's always great rewards. So it is a changing climate. We are seeing more and more grape varieties planted each year than what we kind of hang our hats on. Riesling and Cabernet Franc. They are great staples to this region. But the fact that we are able to branch out and grow this region every single year with more varieties is a testament to one, the challenges we're facing, but the changing climate. And so what makes the Finger Lakes special? Yes, we have cold winters. The vines need a period of dormancy in every area they grow in the world. The winter is a great time for us to rest, but it's a crucial time for the vineyards to rest. And as you mentioned, we had a 70-degree day last week. Today, snow flurries the entire day.
Freezing.
As long as the soil temperature doesn't warm up above 40 degrees, we'll be okay. So cool evenings throughout the winter, but also throughout the summer are also what make our wines unique. Like I said, crucial to dormancy during the winter, but during the summer, cool nights are what preserve our acidity. If you've ever had a glass of Finger Lakes Riesling, it's refreshing. Why is it refreshing? Because we have cool evenings which preserve our acidity. Same thing goes for our reds and all of our other white varieties. Hot days help sugars climb. Cool nights help preserve the freshness in these wines. So I guess that's what I'll kind of go into with our stainless steel Chardonnay. I often say that stainless steel Chardonnay is one of the more challenging wines to make because Chardonnay is not inherently aromatic like Riesling. But to take a grape that's fairly neutral, make something interesting out of it poses a challenge. Finger Lake soils, really, really interesting and diverse because of glaciation. So what we do for our stainless steel Chardonnays, we work with a whole bunch of different vineyards and we put a blend together, highlighting the unique aspects of each one of those terroirs. But we pick a little bit early so that we can have that refreshing acidity.
So one thing, and this is before we go, we're gonna have some fun too. So Chevy, if you wouldn't mind, we're gonna ask y'all a question and have a little bit of participation here. So our little curve tonight is we're gonna have a little quiz. And these quiz questions, and you will be graded, because you all get to basically participate. So everyone in the room, if you're on your phones, you're participating as well. We're going to pose some questions to you with history of Hobart Williams Smith in mind. And it spans the last 6 decades. So we're really trying to hit each decade, but everyone who knows Hobart Williams Smith probably knows some of the history of it all. So what we're going to do is tee up the question from your computer. You'll be able to put your answer in. No cheating, no shouting out the answers, please. But we want to just have some fun with this. So Chevy right now is in the process of putting up those questions, or at least the first one. Oh, she's laughing from the other room, so maybe not. Oh, here we go. Oh. Okay, so we won't be voting. So here's the question, and this is a multiple choice. So I'm going to read it out here and certainly invite, I'll tell you what, for folks who are just put it in the chat what you think the answer is, okay? So here's the first question. In 1970, there were 2 people who actually firebombed the campus. And I'm not joking, for those of you who don't know. You probably have all heard of this one way or the other. Here's the question. What year were the 2 firebombers? Were they freshmen or first year? Were they sophomores? Were they juniors? Or were they seniors? So there's your first set of questions. So the answers are coming in. All right, want to show the picture, Chevy? Because this is, I mean, see, so literally, and there is a follow-up, you might want to throw it in there. What's the name of the guy who incited them to basically do this? And he's got a heck of a cool name, I should say. All right, there is a picture of the actual bomb in itself. It actually happened at Sherrill Hall. And you're seeing the FBI picture there, which was put into evidence. And they called it the Molotov cocktails, you know, the actual form of bomb they used, which is kind of cool. Okay, Chris, you're right on there with the name of it. So his name is Tommy the Traveler. That was the guy who basically was on campus and incited this thing. So got lots of answers here, sophomore, senior, freshman or first year. The right answer, freshman. Yeah. 2 first years were the ones who actually pulled this off. So, okay, that's the first fun question. So, sorry, Dan, you were about to talk about the fun wine, but thought we'd just interject with that.
Jim, there must be a history of Sherrill Hall and catching on fire. When I was a senior there were folks who set that on fire.
So there's got to be something with Sherrill, and it still stands.
It still stands.
And anyone who's lived there know that place could probably withstand a lot of bombs because that thing's built like a bomb shelter.
There's a reason they put first years in brick buildings, right?
Yeah. All right, Dan. So tell us about the Chardonnay, and I'm going to pour some while you're talking.
Yeah. So our stainless steel Chardonnay. This is sourced from two different vineyards on the west side of Seneca Lake. I highlight the fact that it's grown on the west side of Seneca Lake because there is a big debate, and the fact that our winery is on the west side of the lake, I have to represent it. We're 8 miles south of campus, but the debate is the west side of the lake better than the east side of the lake? And I'm not going to say one is better than the other, Jim. I'm just going to say there's different microclimates and there's advantages to both sides. My argument for the west side is that we get the morning sun. The morning sun dries out our canopy. We get a little bit less disease pressure, and our fruit gets the morning sun. It just makes for really nice fruit.
So what do we look for when we're tasting your wine here, right? What do you look for in terms of clarity, aroma? What do you typically smell in a Chardonnay? What aromas does it elicit?
So for stainless steel Chardonnay, I look for the purity of the fruit, right? I want to taste those stone fruit flavors, maybe a little bit of apricot, a little bit of citrus coming in, but I want to take the idea of oak away from this wine for a second. Don't get me wrong, I love oak, but this is Chardonnay in its purest form. And so I'm looking for a refreshing glass of wine, and I'm looking for something that could get my palate started for a meal, or even be the first portion of a meal. So with this, I like some seafood, whether it's scallops, shrimp. I'm a big fan of oysters. This would go great with oysters. And if I'm looking at having this glass of wine with a more substantial meal, this goes great with poultry. This is typically what I open on Thanksgiving.
Excellent. So one of the things we thought too, does it go well with something sweeter? So would you put this, for example, with an almond cookie? Hint, hint.
You nailed it. Absolutely. I don't have much of a sweet tooth, Jim, but an almond cookie and a glass of Chardonnay. Now we're talking.
So one of the things here, I'm going to show of hands for everyone on the phone and here. How many people first are in the ABC crowd? Do you know what ABC stands for? Anything but Chardonnay, right? Any ABCers in here? Because I see hands. I put myself in this category. Why? I always associate the Chardonnay with oak, buttery, heavy. And again, my palate, not that great for me. Yeah. Right? Others disagree. That is what the reputation is of the Chard. And then when you come here, again, warm climate versus cold. The cold climate, you're having an unoaked Chard. When we blind this for people, I love this, right? Folks come in and one of the things we do is a blind tasting, and they'll say what they like and don't like. Invariably, they say 2 things. I like Cab, okay. Or I hate Chard, okay. We'll put in their tasting an unoaked Chard, typically. They'll walk away, not every time, but more often than not, saying, I really like that. What is it? Because they didn't expect it. The difference with cold climate wine, in my view, and one of the things that's eye-opening for people is they're inherently different from the West Coast, the warmer climate grapes. So that's one of the things I love about this stuff, and this Chard in particular.
I've got a fun story there, Jim. Olivia and I were in the ABC category when we were living out in California. You know, Chardonnay to me was always this thing that my grandmother drank, and it was kind of reminded me of the butterscotch candy she'd give me as a kid, right? And it was just like, no, please don't ever pour that for me. It wasn't until we moved to New Zealand and Olivia and I were out sampling Sauvignon Blanc in a vineyard. I mean, 98% of what we grew out there was Sauvignon Blanc. We wandered from one block into the next, and we tasted the fruit, and we're like, this isn't Sauvignon Blanc, but whatever it is, it's delicious. So we went to the grower and we asked him what it was. Well, it was Chardonnay. And I was like, if we can preserve what we're tasting in the vineyard in the glass, then Chardonnay has to be this wonderful thing. And that's why we put such attention on our stainless steel Chardonnay, because every customer who comes into our tasting room tastes the same 5 to 6 wines. And we make 60% of our production is Chardonnay. So they're going to taste the Chardonnay. And this is a good way of saying, let's just see if we can change your mind.
Excellent. Any questions from anyone? Comments, thoughts? We're looking at a lot of nice chat there. People who love this and the fan of this, and they don't like Chard, but they love this one, which is awesome. So we have another question before we go to the next grape. So Chevy, you want to pull up the next question? So one of the things too, while Chevy's pulling it up, there we go. All right, Folk Fest. Some of you know it, some of you don't, right? What year did Folk Fest begin and what year did Folk Fest end? So the options, for those of you who don't see your phone, begins in 1969, 72, 76, and 70. When did it end? 94, 98, 2002, or 2008. So those are your options. And for those of you who've enjoyed Folk Fest, I'm certainly one of them. Dan asked me a question earlier. Do I remember what bands played? I gotta admit, I don't remember one. And yeah, it's probably was what happens at Folk Fest or happened at Folk Fest, but it was a lot of fun, an amazing festival. Anyone else big into Folk Fest in the room or on the yeah?
Jim, I did take some liberty of looking up through the HWS archives who played. So here are 3 names: Doc Watson, Fish, and Bella Fleck.
And some big names. I remember Fish.
There we go.
I do remember that now that you say it.
Bella Fleck played with his banjo teacher, Tony Krishka,
Wow.
when he played here. So the two of them played together, which was almost.
Here's a fairly innocent picture of Folk Fest. This definitely is probably early on in the event, but it certainly did evolve into something very interesting every time.
Is that a picture of young Bill Waller?
Is
No,
it?
that's Charlie Temple. I'm
my
the one
God,
unconscious face down here. Or my dad. That's a
Excellent.
possibility too.
Awesome. Well, good. Well, everyone's got lots of range. 72, 98. There you go, Julie. Fish for sure. 1 and 1. So when did Folk Fest begin? Well, think of the bicentennial of the United States, 1976. And when did it end? In 2002. So that had quite a nice duration. Okay, I don't know why it left though. Is it because of like me not remembering the music?
No, we changed from quarters to trimesters to semesters, and once we got onto semesters, it wouldn't fit.
Another great reason for semesters. Sorry, there's the drinking starting.
When did it end?
Perhaps that will
Whenever.
inspire the current students to bring Folk Fest back.
Maybe.
That would be
Okay,
awesome.
all right. So Dan, now, question for you. And you talked a little bit about the climate change and a little bit about reference to soil and one, but just delve into, if you don't mind, a little bit, like we're nestled in the glacial region, right? And one of the things I just learned as an example is the top 10 deepest lakes in the United States. Seneca Lake is like number 9 or 10, right? It's 684 feet deep, and it's one of its deepest points. The Navy had a base here called Samson for the longest time, where they would do submarine or depth or pressure tests during World War II, just so it wasn't on the coast and subject to attack by any of our enemies or potential enemies. But the lakes themselves have a dramatic impact on the vines and the wine region itself. So talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about the soil, as you made reference to earlier. What are some of the profiles of some of the grapes as a result of that?
Yeah, so it's hard to convince people to visit the Finger Lakes in the middle of winter, but it is a fantastic way to learn what makes the Finger Lakes unique. If you fly into Rochester, you fly into Syracuse, you can look at your little temperature gauge on your car when you leave the airport and drive into the Finger Lakes, just see the temperature change. We are warmer here than either of those areas, but you can also see there's significantly less snow in this area. That doesn't mean we get less precipitation. We just get it in a different form. So I know I'm not something coming to the Finger Lakes in the middle of winter, but it is a great way to see just how unique this region is. That being said, Jim, our summers are getting warmer and our springs are a little bit more mild, our falls are a little bit mild. That allows us to expand our growing season a little bit further. That allows us to grow varietals that weren't typically grown here. We're experimenting with them. For example, last year I had a grower of ours plant 7 different clones of Gamay. We're gonna typically, you'd say 3 to 5 years to grow a vine up to where it's gonna start to produce fruit. We're gonna get fruit this upcoming year, and we're gonna have Gamay here in the Finger Lakes. But let's rewind a little bit. Back in 2017, in Finger Lakes history, no Petite Syrah had ever been grown. We had a grower who ordered Syrah vines from a California nursery, and when they showed up, they didn't say Syrah, they said Petite Syrah. Now, despite very similar names, vastly different grapes, Syrah is grown here in the Finger Lakes. It's a little bit more cold hardy. Petite Syrah would not fall into the category of being cold hardy. But they were budding out. He put them in the ground and they survived 3 winters. And in 2020, we had our first crop. So he called me up and said, Daniel, would you like to work with some Petite Syrah this year? And I said, you mean Syrah? And he goes, no, Petite Syrah. I said, well, let's give it a try. So that's the second wine in your box. Petite Syrah is this tiny, tiny little grape, hence the petite, full of tannin. Holds onto its acid fairly well, and especially in a cool climate, it holds onto its acid very well. I like to think of this red wine as a red wine that pairs really well with a fatty cut of meat, because the tannin helps dry out the palate, and the acid helps cleanse the palate, which leads you back to the plate to get another cut of that porterhouse steak, which is my personal favorite.
That wasn't in the box, by the way.
Oh, you put that in the box for them?
Yeah. But there are some nice fatty meats from Schrader's Farms in there.
Fantastic.
So try that.
18 months in New French Oak, we would have said a couple of years ago that I would have said a couple of years ago that 12 to 18 months in New French Oak for a Finger Lakes Red would have been far, far too much. All you would taste is oak. But the fact that we're expanding our growing season, extending our growing season to get riper grapes allows us to do a little bit more barrel aging.
One of the things I've noted here is everyone's trying your Petite Syrah with your Soprasetta is the quality of the reds here. So a lot of people come in here and say, oh, the reds in the Finger Lakes suck, right? And they'll maybe use some other color from Elford inside, especially because they draw a comparison to their favorite, which is I mentioned before. Oh, I love Cabernet Sauvignon. Okay, well, let's explore the reds here. Dan made reference to the Petite Syrah. Well, you look at some of the grapes and the varietals that are grown here that are red. Another one of whether it's fortunate or unfortunate with climate changes, you see the growing season here is extending a little bit, right? Reds like sun longer, they like the heat longer. The complexity of the reds, one of the things someone said to me once was, oh, the reds here are all single note. And then we poured him a flight and he was shocked at the complexity of them. And it ranged from a Cab Sauv to a Syrah to a Merlot. And the Merlot especially blew his mind, right? Because it's also different given the acid. So the different profile of the reds here in a cold climate makes them very interesting. So I think it's a lot of fun when you explore reds here, right? To have the open mind. Look, it's not that they're all awesome. They're not, just like California or anywhere else. But when you can find how people like Scout here have taken the Petite Syrah and really created something interesting, it's a testament to how this wine region's evolving with the reds in particular. The one question for you, Dan, it goes back to the Chardonnay from April here. What are the Lee's stainless tanks? Seems pretty self-explanatory, but how does preparation change the wines? How does a new winery like yours set up from scratch?
Great questions. So I guess I'll take the first question, which is what are lees? When we inoculate the wines or the juice to make wine, we inoculate with yeast. Once those yeast have completed their job, they fall to the bottom of the tank and they change names. They change from yeast to lees. And the longer you leave a wine on its lees, the creamier it gets, the broader on the palate it gets, the longer on the palate. And so we leave the stainless steel on its lees for 6 to 12 months, depending on the year, so that those flavors do stay on your palate a little longer. The second question, how do you start from scratch? Community. That would be my first answer. The support of a lot of people. The colleges have been great support, but also our neighbors. I mean, part of what brought us back to this was the fact that, if a tractor breaks down, your neighbor's always willing to loan you one. I like to use this very past harvest as an example. On the first day of harvest, 4 things went wrong in our cellar, and 4 different wineries showed up to help us with those issues. So the support of a lot of different people. And Jim, I think it's also the spirit of this region. I've always said that this region is full of makers and doers, and the spirit of this region really has encouraged us to chase it and get after it.
For sure. So great questions, April. We're going to go to Chris's question in a second, but I'm going to fold it in, Chris, if you don't mind, to a question for Daniel, what we're tasting here. So what do you look for in this Petite Syrah? What are the aromas? What's the color? What's the depth? What should we be looking for when we're trying this wine?
Yeah, so as you were mentioning, a lot of people have said, Finger Lakes can't make good red wines. They're too light. Part of what really excited me about this Petite Syrah is just how dark in color we were able to accomplish. But I'm also looking for what, as you said, we're looking for more than just a single note. I don't want to bring the glass up to my nose and say, it smells like blueberries, right? I get a little bit of spice, I get a little bit of vanilla, I get a little bit of plum. And then on the palate, initially I get this almost a little bit of a tart burst. And then as the wine hits the palate, it broadens out. Again, we get a little bit more baking spices, we get a little bit more a little bit of the oak coming through, the spiciness from the oak coming through. And we had a customer say to us, there was a long time that I would order Cabernet Sauvignon every time I went out for dinner. He said, I realized that I was losing so much of the nuance of the food because the 14 to 16% alcohol Cabernet Sauvignon I was drinking was covering it up. He said, what I love about Finger Lakes Reds is that they cleanse the palate and they allow me to enjoy the food as well. So not just enjoying wine, enjoying food as well.
That helps. That helps. So one of the questions Chris raised, are you growing the Petite Syrah on rocks? Like, what are the soils?
So the soils are clay loam. We find that especially red varieties grown on clay loam, offer a broader palate. Again, the flavors linger a little bit longer. And we're growing them on clay loam.
So what are, by the way, if we think of the terroir here, and we think of the differences throughout the region here. Now, if you do come to Vinifera, and I hope you do, when you come in and look at the wall when you walk in, there is a mural that shows the terroirs of the region. And what it demonstrates are just a huge variation in terms of what and how the soils are and what they rest on. So, Dan, what are the typical soils here? Like you mentioned clay, what else?
So there's a fair amount of gravelly loam. There's a fair amount of silt loam. The thing that interests me most about the Finger Lakes is that you can have 2 vineyards that are side by side if you look at them on a GPS, but drastically different soils. And that's what makes this region exciting and interesting. If you come to our tasting room, currently we're pouring 2 Chardonnays side by side. They were both treated identically in the cellar. One comes from the west side of Seneca Lake, one comes from the west side of Cayuga Lake. West side of Seneca Lake grown on clay loam, west side of Cayuga Lake grown almost exclusively on on shale, maybe 2 inches of topsoil, drastically different wines.
Why shale versus clay? What's the difference in terms of growing on one versus the other? Is there a typical sort of difference?
It's a lot about how the water drains through them. And when we say that grapevines don't like wet feet, clay holds the water a little bit longer. Shale certainly lets the water run right through it. It's kind of amazing that grapevines can dig their roots through shale, but they can, and we get really interesting wines out of them.
So Julie was asking about all the cheese in the box, and do they go both with both wines, or is one better with one specific wine versus the other? I'll let you, Dan, start with the cheeses, and cheese typically with a red or a white, because I know we find it does vary wine by wine. And in no small part, it does and goes more with your palate as well. Is it saltier? Is it not? Is it goat? Is it cow? It varies person by person. So my answer for that is always, it's a little bit of taste, but the richer the cheese, hence it goes with red. The lighter the cheese, maybe with a white, but that's not always true.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it spot on, Jim. I often like to say, when you don't let wine be a scary thing. You know, when you order a salad, it's not right. When you order a salad at a restaurant and you take a bite of the lettuce or the tomato, I don't know if I'm tasting it. You never go, I don't know if I'm tasting this lettuce or tomato right. Don't let it be the same way with wine. Just, if you taste the wine and you have it with a soft cheese, let's say white wine with a hard cheese, and you like it, great. If you don't, maybe try it with red wine, right?
I don't know, Bill, what do you think?
Well, I always tell students the best wine is the wine you like, and that's because everybody's experience of flavor is different than everyone else's. There are certain things you can say, you know, if you have a high acid food, you're going to need a wine that will stand up to that. But if the cheese tastes good to you and the wine tastes good to you, then it's the right food wine combination for you. And never let somebody else tell you what you ought to taste. It's one of the most frustrating things I find as somebody who tastes a lot of wines, is when somebody's serving me a wine telling me what I'm supposed to taste, when in fact their experience is unique to them and my experience is unique to me. So it tastes good, eat it. It tastes good, drink it.
Absolutely.
And one of the nice things is the fact that with the cold climate Chardonnays made in stainless steel, and even the reds here, and the light use of oak, you're tasting the wines and they're not being covered up by a surfeit of oak. My first, not a surfeit, but an excess. My first experience in Napa Valley was with my daughter, and I walked into a tasting room and had Chardonnay. And then after we both picked ourselves up off the floor, feeling like we got hit in the face with a gymnasium floor, we could begin to taste the wine. So I've always appreciated the light use and judicious use of both in the form.
So that also leaves us time for another trivia question, because I know all of you are yearning for one. Hallie in the back saying she can't wait to start shouting out answers.
I'm ready.
Okay. So this is fun. Oh, there's a nice statue. Okay.
Easy.
All right. Is it?
I don't know the second.
First question. Who is the sculpture of on campus? Is it William Scanley, Ben Wattenberg, William Smith, or Charles Folger? And then who sculpted it? Jeff Koons, Michelangelo, Ted Aub,
That one.
or Admonia Lewis? So there's your question answers. And shall we go back to that picture? A lot of consistency here. Is this too easy? I mean, Michelangelo is pretty good, by the way.
I've heard that.
You took that up, you can read it out loud.
That's why it's fun. Actually, that would make more sense as I really delve more into this wine, but it's all good.
Here's a little bit of fun Finger Lakes agricultural history to go with this trivia question, and that is that William Smith was a tree nurseryman, and
That's right.
when he was growing trees and shipping trees all over the country, there was a saying largely throughout the Northeast, but also throughout the country, that where a tree is grown, Geneva is known. And that is because
Wow.
William Smith would have fixed a handwritten tag saying grown in Geneva.
That's
And
cool.
a lot of the trees that are in Central Park in New York City were originally from William Smith's tree nursery.
Definitely did not know that. That's actually pretty cool. Fun fact. Now everyone has a little factoid about another fine thing from William Smith.
So William Smith, we always plant trees at
That's
every
right.
year.
William Smith always does, right? Plant a tree at the end of the year.
Every year.
Excellent tradition.
Yep.
Okay, so now with the wines here in the region, we talked a little bit about that, and Bill, appreciate the commentary around really the Chardonnay and you know, a little bit on the California versus here, the oakiness. Talk to us a little bit about oak itself, if you don't mind. I know we're off the well, you have the oak here. We hear French oak, American oak, Hungarian oak. There are others. What are the oaks? Why do you use New American? You said New American, right?
We use New French.
New French, I'm sorry. So you use New French. Why New French? What are some of the differences and what do you look for, right, when you experience these in wines?
This is a great question. I like to look at oak and wine kind of like salt cooking. If you add a little bit of salt to your cooking, it helps enhance the flavors that are already there. You add too much salt to your cooking just tastes like salt. Same thing with wine.
Some people like that.
No, not for me.
Yeah.
Same thing for wine. If you add a little bit of oak to your wine, you're going to enhance the flavors that are already there. And if you add too much, you're just going to taste oak. In terms of the different regions where oak is grown, you're getting different flavors. I like to look at American oak as being a huge contributor of flavor, smokiness, a little bit of caramelization, vanilla. There's a reason that they age bourbon in American oak.
Okay.
You're looking for flavor.
So American oak gives off a lot more flavor than French or Hungarian.
Correct.
Okay.
And so French, I kind of look at adding structure to wine. So it adds a little bit more, you know, so that there's a beginning, middle, and end to the wine. And it does certainly enhance a little bit of the flavor.
Got it.
So what we're doing at our winery, Jim, is we've partnered with a cooperage in the south of France. They're custom making barrels for us. And the barrels, like I said, we're using new French oak barrels. We don't want to use new French oak barrels, but the way the wine industry works is if you want to use used oak, you've got to go through a broker. You don't know where those barrels are coming from. So with this cooperage, we've partnered with them and they're building barrels that hold 3 times as much wine as your typical wine barrel. Less surface area, or hopefully accomplishing the same thing that used oak would give us.
Here's a question. How much does a barrel cost? What did it cost 10 years ago? What does it cost now?
Yeah, so about 10 years ago, we're probably around $1,200 for your standard 60-gallon barrel.
Okay.
We're now closer to $2,000.
So
That's
a little-
before shipping across the Atlantic.
So a little inflation.
A little inflation.
And how long does a barrel typically last?
So your typical 60-gallon barrel is probably good for, let's say, 6 to 10 years.
Okay.
The 180-gallon barrels we're importing, we're hoping will be around the next 30.
Okay. All right. So hopefully good rate of return.
Let's hope. Let's hope.
Bill.
Do you find that the oak gives it a softer mouthfeel when you use it? And does it matter with regard to the size of the barrel with regard to that impact?
Absolutely. So the question we have on this end, in case folks didn't hear it, is do we find that oak offers a little bit softer mouthfeel? And does it matter the size of the oak barrel? I think this Petite Syrah is a great example of that. When this wine left stainless steel tanks to go to barrel, it was nearly undrinkable because it was just this chewy, dried out your mouth, tannin, high acid wine. We chose to use 60-gallon, your traditional oak barrels, brand new, because they do soften. They do soften wine.
Thanks. All right. So next question, because we have to have another. I know we're running low on time. We have about 8 minutes left. So hold on. Before we do the next question, Chevy, any questions for anyone, any comments? How are you enjoying the wine? We'd love to just hear from some of you. So unmute your phone and speak up a little bit. How are people doing? How are you enjoying the wine? Heck, even if you have a little factoid to offer or whatever, go ahead. We'd love to hear from some of you. And if not, I'm going to put 1 or 2 of you on the spot. like Lisa. Everyone, so I'm gonna ask you, so, let's see here, there you go, should be on. Oh, I thought I had the power here to unmute people. I think Chevy took. Oh, there you go, Lisa. So,
Yeah.
love having you here, and thank you for being such a terrific customer, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome.
With my Kelly, right?
Yeah.
So Lisa, tell us a little bit about what you're experiencing with the wines, what you think, any comments, anything from the wines you're trying so far?
Well, I'm like a few of you. I'm not a Chardonnay drinker. I don't like the buttery, the oaky. And so I was very pleasantly surprised with your Chardonnay. I'm a Sauv Blanc drinker. So really enjoyed that. And your Pinot, so we're in California. So your Pinot, to me, I liked it. I liked it a lot. It's lighter than we have out here in California. It's more drinkable to me than the California Pinots. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
So thanks, Lisa.
Cheers. And Lisa, I just want to make clear, I enjoy a lot of California wines. We've done a lot of comparative
For sure.
California to New York. There are a lot of fantastic California wines.
We're actually doing that right now. We're
doing a little taste
comparing a
comparison.
local Pinot with yours.
Yeah.
I love that. Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Anyone else? How are you enjoying the wine so far? Or tell us a little bit about your Hobart or William Smith trivia, even something you want to throw in there. Pick on someone. I don't know. How about Nelson and Ann? There you go. You're waving. You see the whole. I mean, you're wearing this sweater, so I got a call on you for that.
You notice I'm pleased. I
Both of you, for sure.
have a late submitted question, so I'm going to throw it in here and you can address it if you got time or not. There seems to be a trend with beer and wine for non-alcoholic beverages. Have you considered that? And if so, what challenges does it present to you as a winemaker?
Question.
I don't think I caught the whole question.
Oh, non-alcoholic wines. There's a trend towards non-alcoholic wine, non-alcoholic beer. Is that something you're considering, or even comment on the trends or what you're seeing in your region?
Yeah, I mean, as the market moves towards more conscientious buyers, health conscious buyers, I think that non-alcoholic wines and beers are an incredibly important sector of the market. I often get the question, why can't I buy Riesling grapes in a grocery store? And the comment I have to give back is it's far too expensive. The value of a Riesling grape in a bottle of wine is far greater than that at a grocery store. But that being said, there are few juices as tasty in this world as Riesling juice. And so I want to push this region, and I like the comment from this gentleman. I want to push myself to offer a taste of these wine or these juices as non-alcoholic.
So I'll tell you, it's interesting. I'll tell you what. So Nelson, it's a great question too. So we also work with another winery here called Fulkerson, right? And he actually went and he's created an entire juice line using the wine grapes, as Dan just said here. So he created a Riesling juice, a Gewürztraminer juice, the different wines that grow here because of that trend. So we certainly see it here when we serve people. Not a huge percentage. We do still attract a lot of drinkers. That's what it goes in the region. Cheers. But there certainly is a trend towards it. And you're seeing, I think, Nelson, certainly some products that are emerging because of it, for sure. What is it? No Juice January or all that stuff. All those trends are here. Well, what does it became? For me, it became no juice, dry January, then it became damp, then it just became wet really fast. So I don't know what you guys have done, but definitely weak. So anyway, but it's a great question, Nelson. Anyone else have any questions or whatnot? I know we're running out of time here, but I want to throw out and see if there are any more questions here before we wrapped up.
Are the colleges organizing wine tours in the Finger Lakes and beer too?
No. Bill will take you on a personal
Call me.
tour. Call Bill. But no, it is, Allison, a terrific question. And I agree, we should. So
Cookie.
the Finger Lakes haven't caught up yet with the tourist industry. I don't know how else to put that. So part of the reason I came here, and Hallie Varenka, class of 20 is here, right? And Hallie manages Finger Lakes Goods next door. One of the things we see, especially in the summer, 9 out of 10 customers who come here aren't from here. They're here to visit folks like Dan and what Dan's doing, right? And what Dan and Olivia are doing, right? And they're coming from all over the place, primarily Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York. But increasingly you're seeing people from Texas, California, coming here to explore the region, France.
Cookie.
The evolution that's occurring here is pretty remarkable. Now, one of the things I'm going to talk up in about 3 weeks, FL Excursion, is coming up,
Yep.
right? This is a global Riesling conference. They hold it here, France, Germany, or Washington, I think are the locations, right? It's a global conference here in Geneva, New York. Now, global for Genevans usually means they might go to New York City, right? That's foreign enough for them. And I say that as a Genevan, so I guess I can say that. But it's really a remarkable thing that's evolved here. So back to the question about the tours, anyone who's looking for an opportunity, I'm telling you, doing tours is a great example of what's trying to catch up here, because it will be booked and sold out. I guarantee you, season after season after seasons are just not enough. Just like Uber drivers. Anyone wants to drive an Uber, come on up. Plenty of opportunity for it.
I will also give a shout out to Jim's business. If you find yourself in Geneva with very limited amount of time, a trip to Vinifera will give you a quick tour of the Finger Lakes.
Yep, no, I appreciate that. Or look at our wine club too. And by the way, an offer to everyone, I just made it up. So, but I can do it because I own it. So anyone who joins the wine club, your first shipment will include a bottle of Scout wine as a gift. Just put in there. We'll know you did it, but just put in there Hobart William Smith tasting. But we love supporting local. So look, let me close this out then, as I know we're getting to the end here, and say first, thank you, Dan, for being here and for these terrific wines, for taking a risk. I mean, think about this, folks. For any of you who started your own business, you know this. Dan and Olivia have taken a step to not only open their own business, but to open up a freaking winery. That is not an easy or simple thing. So you're enjoying something that is clearly out of passion and love. Because, Dan's making his billions on this now, and he has 2 private jets as a result of this. But seriously, though, if you look at what Dan made reference to earlier, these are family-owned wineries for the most part. When you come to the Finger Lakes region and you talk to the wine owners, they're family-owned businesses. You don't get that in other regions very much anymore. This is really a region full of that. And what Dan and Olivia have done is nothing short of remarkable. So please, definitely appreciate you supporting Scout. Appreciate you being here, Dan, and doing this. And appreciate everyone coming in for a little bit of fun and enjoying this. So what I would just recommend everyone, keep the questions coming, stay engaged, involved, come up, come visit. Love to have a glass of wine with you, as with Dan and Olivia. I'm sure just about everyone in this room. So special thanks also to Chevy and Teresa, who helped organize, who's been out with COVID all week, and now she has a sinus infection. So, it's the gift that keeps on giving, right? But anyway, we appreciate all this, appreciate you, and really want to thank everyone for participating, both here in the room and on the call. So everyone, cheers.
Cheers.
Let's do one little toast to HWS, to all of our friends and family, to Dan and everyone. So thank you all very much.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.